Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here with VCalla Productions. Today I'm sitting here with Riley Brockington. He is the Ottawa City Councillor for Ward 16 River. Welcome to Let's Discuss Politics, Riley. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Well, it's so great to have you. And as always, a note to the audience to make sure you're staying updated with me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, VC Productions 25. Check out my website, vincenzocalla.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, and get notifications here on YouTube. So without further ado, let's get into this interview. So our first segment is called Riley's Story, where we'll talk a bit about who Riley is and his political history. So first off, can you tell me about a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics?
Sure. Born and raised here in Ottawa, which, as you know, is a political town. My dad was a federal public servant in a number of departments, but always had a true love of our city. I'm very proud to be a native Ottawan and certainly acknowledge and realize that at the municipal government level, that is the level of government that impacts people the most, particularly on their day-to-day goings about in the community or through the city, and just always had a civic appreciation for our city and what local groups or grassroots organizations can do to make the city a better place. So I'm truly about serving people and making positive impacts in our community, and that really is what's drawn me to city government. So that's my story.
So on that now, you were first elected in 2014 and have been reelected two times since then. So why did you decide to run for the municipal level for councillor back in 2014?
Well, I had the honor of serving the same ward for two terms of office as a school board trustee. So, uh, before I became a city councillor, I served here on the public school board from 2003 to 2010. And that gave me, I think, pretty solid understanding of the main players in this zone or in this ward. And some of the issues, you certainly don't have the same or all of the same issues at a school board level that you do at a city council level. City council is much more broad and the scope is much wider. Um, but that I think was a good introduction to the types of issues that I would be seeing as a city councillor. I took a term off in 2010. I had a young family at that point. And when I was married, my wife was quite clear that having a full-time husband and a full-time father is what was needed. So I heeded that advice. And there was an opportunity that came up in 2014 when the incumbent councillor was retiring. And I really hadn't decided to run then. I was really focusing on 2018 when my kids were a bit older. But given that there was no incumbent, that really is an ideal time to run. But that's sort of the timelines of running. And again, my focus and my passion is the municipal level. So while I would never rule out MPP or MPP in the future, that really is not my ambition. My focus and what makes me happy is serving at the local level. The local issues are very important. It's nonstop. Every day is very busy, and that's truly where my heart is. So the city government and city issues for me is where it's at.
Well, that was a good transition into my next segment now, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk a bit about your experiences and achievements as a city councilor over the past 8 and a bit years. So first off, what is your favorite part about serving your community of River Ward as their councilor?
Well, there are certainly many answers I could provide. The relationships that have been established, the people. There's six main neighborhoods here in River Ward. I've got the map behind me, and the Rideau River is the spine of the ward, and there's three major neighborhoods on each side. But getting to know community leaders and residents and people who feel passionate about various issues is very rewarding. But then also working together, trying to prioritize what our issues are, what can we set a course for in any particular year, what are the main objectives we want to accomplish by the end of the year, and working with people to get that done. So a lot of people expect me and me only to solve every problem in the community. That's really not realistic. It's how do we work together, draw on people's skill sets. Volunteer labor is important. If you're trying to open a community garden or park cleaning or other projects. But really, it's trying to, by talking with people, understanding what the issues are. And I have made it a point to get out of my, I'll just call it the comfort zone or well-established zone of outreach, and acknowledge that there are many segments of our community who are not engaged, who do not participate in the community or political process, but they have a lot of good things to say and a lot of good feedback to share with me. So it's very important to be proactive in communications, proactive in outreach, get out in the ward, get on the street and talk to people and sit down with people who are traditionally don't come to community meetings, don't are single parents or shift workers. They don't have time to be part of that regular process, just to listen and find out from them what the key issues are from their perspective, what are the issues impacting them and their family, and take that feedback and help mold our communities and ward for the better. So that's very important to me as well.
So on that now, I want to ask you what your favorite achievement as the counselor has been over the past years that you've been serving.
Well, I didn't run to what I say is to build pyramids. I didn't run for a big, shiny, um, massive accomplishment. I think that there's great value in serving the community, focusing on the core services that a city offers, listening to people, like I said earlier, what those issues are. So when I first door knocked in 2014 and understood that speeding and lack of enforcement was basically the common theme in the ward, the number one safety issue, the thing that really impacts communities the most, in my opinion, is the prevalence of speeding. Working with police, getting additional resources. We have neighborhood response teams now in Carlington and the South End. And it's really to have a better relationship, not just a better relationship with the police, but also for them to understand what the key issues are in communities and get that out. But whether it's from park improvements to road improvements, to bigger issues, when you look at citywide issues like the LRT, public transit, last budget cycle, I had a motion passed that's going to provide free transit now for every child 12 and under. City of Ottawa was lagging way behind. Every other major municipality in Canada has free transit up to age 11 or 12. All the major cities, east to west, west to east. Ottawa was up to 5 years old 2 years ago. Last year, we made a minor change. I moved it up to age 7. And starting on Canada Day this year, 2023, free transit permanently for children 12 and under. That's going to help families. That will get more kids on public transit, expose them more, get them used to traveling by public transit. And I think will actually be a net benefit to the city of Ottawa and the people. So that's one example, but really there are issues in every community, almost on every street, and it's working with residents to understand what those issues are and how can the city help you to solve those issues.
Well, and I'm sure that in the next segment we're going to talk about LRT because that's sure to come up in the next segment. But before we move on to that, I want to ask you quickly about your role as the chair of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. What sort of role does that, or what sort of work does that role entail, and what are some of the things that you're working on this term as the chair of that committee?
That's a great question. This is a brand new committee. So we had community and protective services that was a very large committee. And the thinking was it would be split in half, and one would be more of a community and social service focus, and the other would be emergency preparedness and protective services committee. So the committee I chair looks after Ottawa bylaw, Ottawa fire, Ottawa paramedics, and emergency preparedness. We will be looking at the Ottawa bylaw work plan for this term of council. So what are the 4-year plan that looks at renewing or revising bylaws in the city of Ottawa? So we might establish a list of 8, 10 bylaws and go through a normal cyclical review that need to be looked at. We have the taxi bylaws. So we have issues with the regulations that oversee taxis, private vehicle companies like Uber and Lyft. We'll be looking at that. We have level 0 challenges in the city. So there are times when there are no available ambulances because they're all in use. And when that happens, there's a term called level zero, where there are no available ambulances in the city of Ottawa. As our population continues to age, the average age of a resident continues to increase, and our population as a city continues to increase. The challenges for our paramedic service will only increase. So there's a number of some innovative solutions that have been proposed and are enacted, but we're still having these backlogs at hospital ERs. When the ambulance attendant comes in, if the ER is overwhelmed and they can't receive a patient yet, the paramedics have to stay with that patient until they're offloaded, until the hospital officially receives them. And so you have a lot of people waiting and a lot of paramedics looking after that patient not on the road. And so we have a number of challenges in that regard. So we will be busy. The tornado, the derecho, ice storm, all within the last 5 years have caused us to think, are we really ready for these types of emergencies? The city literally plans for 30 different types of, let's just call them major events that can impact residents in the city of Ottawa, power outages, etc. And a number of my colleagues and myself are very interested in looking at ways to better prepare communities in the first 72 hours. If you don't have power or major utilities, how are we going to help each other in those first 72 hours? So I do think there needs to be some education and outreach, information sharing on how we can be better prepared. That will be a focus as well this term.
Well, definitely, and I want to say it was since 2017, like you were mentioning, all these different things that have hit us, and power outages, and last summer, this winter, floods, which is currently happening right now. By the time this comes out, hopefully the flooding should not be an issue anymore. But it's an ongoing issue that happens every year, and yeah, these power outages that are happening. So sort of looking out for each other, we're going through this as a city and working on that. So the last segment is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk about a bit about this world of politics that surrounds us. So first off, who is or who was another politician that inspires you as a counselor?
That's a great question. I'm actually uncomfortable when politicians cite other politicians because I think it limits our focus on people who, we look up to and are good role models. But I've always said that people who, under the most challenging times or challenging circumstances, who continue to perform and perform well. And if I cite, Winston Churchill during the Second World War, Nelson Mandela, who was incarcerated for almost 3 decades, comes out and ultimately becomes the president of South Africa, leads his people forward in that regard. Easy to give up after 30 years in jail, but he came out and wanted to lead his country. There are many others, but people who stay calm and carry on, that sort of famous British saying, under the most challenging of times, remain focused and remain calm and ask yourselves, what do we need to do to serve our people and continue to do that? These are interesting times now. Certainly, there's a greater diversity of politicians being elected at long last. This needs to happen. You need to have a better reflection around the decision-making table of the people that you serve. That's very, very good. And I think some issues that have been dormant or not addressed are finally getting time that they need, and that's very good. And that will really only happen when you have greater diversity around the table. So modern times are bringing new issues, and I think that's very good as well.
So let's talk a bit about issues now. So as you were mentioning, there's a lot of issues surrounding us right now going on in the city and all that. And I wanted to ask you, what are some important issues that you want to see focus on and you want to focus on more?
Well, the city council that I was part of the last term declared two specific emergencies that we said to really be laser focused on. One is housing and homelessness. We have declared an emergency in the city. We do not have sufficient housing stock for the people who need housing, from all the way from they're currently in a shelter, even not in a shelter yet, on the streets, all the way up to people who have the means, who are struggling to find ultimately housing that they can afford to buy or rent. And the other is the climate emergency, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We had a big report this week, an environment committee giving us basically an annual report charting progress. We're making progress, but not at the rate that we actually wanted to. Um, and that has to be continue a main focus for the city of the next literally years, if not decades. Both, believe it or not, are fully embraced by everyone. You would think that our the residents in the city would fully embrace it, but everyone has their own set of priorities. Ultimately, council has made that decision, and some recent legislation that the provincial government has introduced, because housing continues to be a major priority for them as well, is changing the landscape about how housing gets built and zoning parameters. Zoning is basically, in layman's language, how land gets classified for use. You can't build whatever you want on land. It has to have a particular classification, and they're loosening up the strings in that regard to facilitate more building of different types of housing, particularly affordable housing. So many priorities. I could go on. I could talk about transit. I could talk about how racialized or First Nation focus, well, also very important. Traffic, transportation master plan, which is basically a blueprint for major transportation projects over the next 25 years is being looked at. That's very important as well. But really, when you have this sea of issues, we basically said there are two major emergencies, and that has to be a major focus for this term.
Definitely, and so many of these issues and so many issues that keep coming up over the past five or 6 weeks straight, where I've been having your colleagues on council
Yes.
coming on and talking with so many counselors and colleagues of yours about housing and about helping the most vulnerable. And that was a big topic when I talked with the mayor about that, and sort of talking about helping those that need the help and making Ottawa a better place for everybody. And I guess we'll end it there today.
Great. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate this opportunity to chat both about River Ward, but also about the city of Ottawa, the level of government that impacts people the most. That's why people should be the most engaged, I think. Voter turnout seems to be lower at the city level than any other level. And yet, this is the level of government that impacts people the most. So I certainly encourage people to get more involved and more aware of what's going on, because decisions that we take at City Hall will impact you the most. But thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, it was so great to have you. It was a great discussion. So make sure to check out this interview, the other interview with Riley on here on YouTube for top 10. If you're watching on the date of the premiere, it's going to be coming out on Friday. So Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla signing out.